2 weeks after a perfect blind date, Ethan Miller pulls into the Branchville Elementary lot with his 7-year-old daughter Lily, thinking he's finally ready to start over. Then Lily bolts across the grass and hugs a little boy. "Noah!" And then Ethan looks up. Claire, the woman from the cafe, is standing there, frozen with Noah at her side. They both hid the same truth, and now their kids are already friends. Before they can explain, Claire's controlling ex shows up and turns the moment into a public weapon. "Would you stay or walk away? Stay to the end and tell us where you're watching from." Ethan double-parked the 2017 Honda CR-V just off Main Street in Ridgefield, Connecticut, right across from Jesse Lee Memorial Church. He glanced at the clock on the dash, 9:42 a.m. The family event at Branchville Elementary had started at 9 sharp, but being late didn't bother him as much as the ache in his stomach. It wasn't physical. It was the ache of having to show up as the composed, single parent again, while pretending he didn't carry shards of his divorce around in every pocket. Lily, his daughter, sat behind him humming to herself, hugging her Spider-Man backpack like it was a secret. She had drawn a picture that morning, a house with stick figures and a dog they didn't have yet. "You ready, Peanut?" he asked, adjusting the sleeve of his Columbia jacket. She nodded, and, without waiting for him, opened the back door and ran toward the lawn in front of the school. The grass was damp and patchy, scattered with booths and craft tables. Ethan followed behind, just a few steps too slow to catch what was about to happen. Lily spotted a boy a few yards ahead, holding a piece of chalk and laughing near the sidewalk where kids were drawing dinosaurs. "Noah!" she shouted, her voice piercing the crowd like a note no one expected. Ethan froze mid-step. The name landed in his chest like a misplaced key turning a lock he hadn't meant to touch. When he looked up, he saw Claire from the cafe, the woman who had stirred something in him with her hesitant smile and steady voice. She stood stiffly near a group of folding chairs, her hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the very boy Lily had run to. She hadn't mentioned a child. Neither had he. They both had left that part out. In the space of 2 seconds, all the ease of that night, shared laughs, nervous silences, the way she traced the rim of her coffee cup, came crashing back with weight. She caught his eye. Her mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. She looked like someone whose secret had just been spoken aloud by the wind. Ethan walked toward her slowly, careful not to rush, careful not to look too startled. Noah and Lily were already on the ground, drawing a T-Rex in bright blue and green chalk. "Hey," he said, stopping a foot from her. His voice came out softer than intended. "So, this is Noah." Claire nodded once, the motion small and deliberate. "I didn't mention him," she said, her voice thick. "I should have, I know, People usually run when I do." Ethan glanced down at Lily, then at Claire. "I didn't mention Lily either." He paused, rubbed the back of his neck. "It wasn't about you. It was about me not screwing this up from the first minute." She let out a dry breath, half laugh, half shame. "I was afraid you'd see me as complicated." He shook his head. "I think we're both past simple." And their eyes lingered for a second too long, like they were trying to rebuild trust that hadn't even been broken yet, just misplaced. Before either of them could find another sentence to build a bridge over the awkwardness, a black Ford F-150 pulled up along the edge of the street. The sound of the engine didn't register as important until the door slammed. Mark stepped out wearing that same smug smirk Ethan remembered from Claire's brief story about her ex, the man who knew how to dress charm like armor. He walked with purpose, his boots crunching gravel, stopping just shy of where Claire stood. "So this is the new scene," Mark said casually, loud enough to draw eyes from nearby parents sipping Dunkin' coffee. "Family arts and crafts with the flavor of the week?" Claire tensed immediately, her entire posture shifting. Noah stood up, sensing something off, and walked closer to her. "Don't," she said quietly to Mark, her voice sharp in its restraint. Ethan didn't move yet. He was watching, calculating. Mark smiled at him. "I'm guessing you're the guy from the cafe? She likes coffee dates. Makes it easier to vanish afterward." Claire took one small step back, barely noticeable, but Ethan caught it. That step held 10 years of being made to feel small. He didn't hesitate. Without raising his voice or posturing, he stepped forward, not aggressively, just enough to stand slightly in front of her in the space where Mark's words had landed. "You need to go," Ethan said calmly. Mark laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Or what? You'll draw me a dinosaur too?" Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't explain himself. He didn't escalate. His silence, the way he simply stood there like a wall that wouldn't move, said more than any threat could. A few parents had started to take notice, and that was enough for Mark to back off with a shake of the head. "You always find your audience," he muttered to Claire, then turned back toward his truck. As he left, Claire let out a breath she'd clearly been holding. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. Her eyes, wide, stunned, exhausted, met Ethan's, and he knew she had not expected anyone to stay when things got this real. The rest of the morning passed in fragments. Lily and Noah kept playing like the moment hadn't existed, as if kids could instinctively protect themselves from adult storms by sheer imagination. Claire sat on the edge of one of the folding chairs, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of a styrofoam coffee cup she hadn't asked for. Ethan stood nearby, not hovering, but present. They didn't talk much after that, not in full sentences, but they exchanged pieces. She asked if Lily liked art. He said she used to draw space rockets, now mostly princesses with laser beams. He asked if Noah liked dinosaurs. She said he thought he was one. Before they left, Claire bent down to tie Noah's shoelaces and dropped her keys. Ethan picked them up and placed them gently in her hand. Their fingers touched for just a second too long, and neither pulled away. On the drive home, Lily was already asking when she could see Noah again. Ethan didn't have an answer, but he glanced at the paper still in his coat pocket, the napkin from the cafe, with Claire's name written in blue pen, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like folding it away. Claire didn't text Ethan the next day, or the one after that. She stared at the folded napkin, with his name and number at least 10 times tucked into the silverware drawer beside mismatched spoons and a Sharpie missing its cap. Every time she opened that drawer to pack Noah's lunch, usually turkey and cheddar, no crust, always cut into triangles, the napkin seemed louder than anything else in the kitchen. She kept it there not out of indifference, but reverence. She wasn't used to someone staying. When she finally sent a message, it wasn't a hi or hope you're well. It simply read, "Noah's asking about Lily. Saturday at Ballard Park." Ethan replied 6 minutes later, "She's been asking too. We'll be there." And so they began, quietly, as if speaking too much would shake the balance. Their meetings were short. Coffee from Tuscan Cup, always to go. The kids would run ahead, Ethan and Claire behind, close but not quite together. They spoke about school field trips, about how Lily refused to wear anything but purple, about how Noah kept calling Saturn the onion planet for no clear reason. Every time they met, Claire said little, but Ethan noticed how she laughed a second longer each time. And Claire noticed how his shoulders stopped curling inward, like he no longer expected the world to collapse. In his car, an old coffee-stained post-it note clung stubbornly to the dash, written in Lily's uneven letters, "You got this, Dad." It had been there since the week she started first grade. He had almost taken it down once after a long day in court, but changed his mind when he saw her waiting on the porch. Now he glanced at it before every meeting with Claire, letting the words settle. He didn't tell her much about his divorce, not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't want pity. Still, it came out in fragments, that his ex had moved to San Diego, that the last thing she said before leaving was, "I just can't be someone's mother all the time." Claire didn't judge. She just nodded and let the silence absorb it. and when she spoke, she never dramatized Mark. "He likes control," she said once, handing Ethan a juice box for Lily. "He doesn't hit, if that's what you're thinking, but he knows how to leave bruises where they don't show." Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out an old keychain of Lily's, 2 plastic dolphins in a heart, and gave it to Claire without a word. She turned it in her fingers, understanding the gesture. He wasn't trying to fix her pain. He was saying, "I see it." Mark, as if sensing his fading grip, returned with sharper tactics. He began showing up at drop-offs unannounced, commenting to other parents at Branchville Elementary that Claire wasn't stable lately, that maybe it was time someone more reliable had custody. One afternoon, Claire came home to find a letter from a local law office she hadn't heard of, Sutton and Barrow LLP, requesting mediation regarding Noah's living situation. She didn't cry. She just stood in the hallway, coat still on, reading it twice. Then she texted Ethan, "I need help. Not to fix it, just to not be alone in it." He was at her door 20 minutes later, no jacket, holding a manila folder of resources. Names of child advocacy lawyers, notes from people he knew at the courthouse, even a printout from the Connecticut Bar Association's family law resources. "This isn't me rescuing you," he said gently, setting the folder on the table. "It's just, you don't have to do it all yourself." Claire sat across from him, eyes unmoving, hands flat on the wood. "I'm not used to people who stay," she said. "Then maybe get used to me," Ethan answered, and they didn't speak again for 5 whole minutes, letting the quiet carry the weight. The school principal, Mrs. Callahan, agreed to meet with Claire and Ethan together. It wasn't formal, just a check-in, but the fact that Ethan showed up beside her, without being asked, shifted something in how people saw the situation. Mark had always counted on Claire's silence to do the damage. But now there were other voices. Mrs. Callahan listened, took notes, and offered to write a formal report if needed. Afterward, in the school parking lot, Claire sat in Ethan's car, her hands on her knees. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. Ethan leaned on the steering wheel, keys dangling. "I know, but I wanted to." She looked out the window for a long moment before saying, "You keep doing that, showing up when you could walk away." Ethan turned to her and with no flair said, "Yeah, and I'm going to keep doing it." There was no kiss, no dramatic touch. But when Claire got out of the car, she left the glove she always wore on her left hand on the passenger seat. She didn't come back for it, and Ethan didn't move it. He just left it there. That night, while Noah was asleep, Claire opened her drawer and took out the napkin. The ink had faded slightly from the folds, and the number looked smudged. She smoothed it out and, without thinking too hard, wrote Ethan's name on the back, underlined once. Then, as if afraid the gesture might betray her, she folded it back again and placed it under the tray of spoons. Meanwhile, Ethan cleaned out the back seat of his CRV for the first time in weeks. He threw out snack wrappers, a broken crayon, an old brochure from Mystic Aquarium, and finally paused at the post-it from Lily. He peeled it off gently, then stuck it inside the sun visor where he could see it only when he needed to. Not constantly, but on purpose. He didn't call Claire that night. She didn't text either, but neither of them needed to. For the first time in years, they both felt the quiet was not absence. It was trust starting to form. On Saturday, they met again at Ballard Park. Lily and Noah brought a shared sketchbook and crayons, planning to invent a planet. Ethan brought hot chocolate from Ross Bread Shop, the kind with real whipped cream, and Claire arrived wearing both gloves again. But this time, when she saw Ethan, she took the left one off and handed it to him. No words, just the exchange. He took it and put it in his coat pocket like it had always belonged there. The kids sat on a bench, arguing over whether the new planet had 2 suns or 3. Claire leaned close enough to Ethan that their arms brushed. "I told Noah you're not just someone we see sometimes." Ethan glanced at her. And what did he say? Claire smiled, eyes tired but lighter. He said if you were a planet, you'd have a lot of moons, because you always come back around. Ethan laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt like something had settled, not finished, but begun. The event was supposed to be harmless. A fall family gathering at Branchville Elementary, complete with apple cider stands and a fundraising raffle for the school's new art supplies. Parents stood in clumps by the gymnasium entrance, sipping from white paper cups with the PTA logo, chatting about Thanksgiving plans and which teachers might retire next year. Ethan had just bent down to help Lily untangle her shoelace from the wheel of a rolling chalkboard when he heard Claire's voice flatten mid-laugh. He turned. Mark was already there, close enough that she had instinctively stepped back, just slightly, but enough for Ethan to catch it. Noah stood behind her, staring at the ground, holding the raffle ticket booklet that had been in his hand moments earlier. Mark's voice was cool, coated in faux civility. "Nice to see you out and about, Claire. Big crowd today, huh? You always did like attention." A few nearby parents looked over, curious but unsure. Claire's face had lost all color, and her arms had drawn inward as if her body already knew what was coming. Ethan straightened and walked up beside her, placing himself gently, deliberately between her and Mark. "Mark," Ethan said without raising his voice. He looked him in the eye. "This isn't the time or place." Mark smiled, not kindly. "Every place is the right place when it comes to making sure my son's safe." He looked around, addressing no one and everyone. "I mean, you bring a man around your kid after what, 2 coffee dates? That's stability, huh?" Claire opened her mouth, but nothing came. Noah shifted closer to her, pressing his side against her hip. Lily, a few feet away, froze mid-step, holding a half-eaten granola bar and staring. Ethan didn't flinch. "Enough," he said, this time louder, his voice still steady. "You're creating a scene. I'm asking you to leave. Right now." Mark scoffed, stepping closer, but before he could say another word, Ethan turned to the school administrator, Mr. Delgado, who'd been talking to a parent near the sign-in table. "Can we get someone from the office? This needs to be documented." That was all it took. The request wasn't loud or confrontational, but it was official, public. Mark hesitated, bristling at the implication of being witnessed. He muttered something under his breath, turned, and walked toward the parking lot, his pride more bruised than his ego would admit. After Mark left, Claire stood completely still. She wasn't crying, but her hands shook visibly as she helped Noah reattach the raffle booklet to its rubber band. Ethan stayed close but didn't touch her. He understood the difference between protection and possession. A few parents avoided eye contact, but others offered brief glances of recognition, as if they had seen enough to understand more than Claire expected. Later, after the event, she sat in the passenger seat of Ethan's CR-V, silent. Her fingers were locked tightly in her lap. "I didn't expect it to hit that hard," she said finally. "It wasn't what he said. It's that he knew he could make me feel it." Ethan didn't reply right away. Instead, he reached into the cup holder and handed her a bottle of water. She took it, sipped once, then stared at the dashboard. "No one's ever done that before, stood in front of me like that. I didn't know it could feel like safety." Ethan exhaled, resting one hand on the steering wheel. "You deserve to feel that," he said. "Every day, not just on good days." She nodded, eyes still down, but something in her posture loosened like a grip she didn't know she'd been holding. A few nights later, on a cold Wednesday that smelled faintly of fireplace smoke and wet leaves, Claire came to Ethan's house in Ridgefield for dinner. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken thighs, potatoes with rosemary, and steamed green beans. Lily had helped set the table, complete with folded napkins and a place card she made that said Miss Claire in purple marker. Noah wore his cool shirt, a faded navy tee with the NASA logo, and kept showing Ethan the glow-in-the-dark print under the kitchen light. While the kids played a memory card game on the floor, Claire and Ethan sat across from each other at the dining table, the sound of laughter grounding the room in something stable. At one point, Claire stood up, walked over to the side drawer near the fridge, and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She held it without speaking, then placed it on the table between them. Ethan recognized it instantly, the napkin from the cafe, edges frayed, ink smudged. "I kept this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not because I thought you'd call, but because I didn't want to forget how it felt." To Hope, she stepped back, arms folded, like someone giving away the last thing they believed in. Ethan didn't touch the napkin. Instead, he opened the drawer beneath the microwave, pulled out a plain notepad, and wrote something with slow, deliberate strokes. He didn't rush. When he finished, he tore the sheet cleanly, folded it once, and stood to place it on the refrigerator door. He used the magnet Lily had brought home from a field trip to the Maritime Aquarium in Norwalk, a small sea turtle with chipped paint. Claire walked over and looked. 4 names: Ethan, Claire, Lily, Noah. Nothing more, nothing less. He didn't say, "We're a family now." He didn't need to. The gesture was louder than any declaration. Claire stood there for a moment, one hand on the fridge handle, the other covering her mouth. Her shoulders trembled. She didn't sob. Just let the weight of it break through slowly, honestly. Ethan didn't move toward her. He stayed where he was, letting her have the space to fall apart and pull herself back together without interruption. And when she turned around, eyes red but clear, he didn't ask if she was okay. He just nodded, like someone who already knew the answer. Later that night, after Noah and Lily had fallen asleep on opposite ends of the couch, a blanket stretched unevenly between them. Claire stood near the kitchen doorway, watching them breathe in rhythm. "I didn't think I'd get here," she said quietly. Ethan stood behind her, arms crossed, leaning against the counter. "Here, how?" he asked. She turned her head slightly. "This kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't feel like waiting for something to go wrong." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the fridge door. "Maybe it's not quiet," he said. "Maybe it's peace." She smiled faintly and walked over to the fridge. She ran her fingers over the names he had written earlier. Her hand lingered on Noah, then Lily, then her own. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The paper was still there. 4 names, unadorned, held in place by a sea turtle. And for the first time in a long time, Claire didn't feel like an outsider in her own story. What did you think about Ethan's choice to step in and stay when Mark tried to humiliate Claire in front of everyone? If you were in Ethan's place, would you have walked away or stood your ground for Claire and the kids? Tell us in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? And if you want to see what happens next for Ethan, Claire, Lily and Noah, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.